So I'm going to call the meeting to order. And as you can see, here comes Daniel. As you can see, Floor can't be with us tonight, so I will be leading our meeting. And the first step is going to ask for any adjustments to our agenda. Hi, Daniel. No adjustments to our agenda. So moving on, I'm going to say welcome to all of our guests and thank you all for joining us tonight in our virtual meeting. And I'm going to open it up to our public comments, and the time limit will be strictly enforced. So if you want to make a public comment, please raise your hand. Seeing none, we're going to keep moving, and our next section of our meeting is going to be a presentation on the strategic plan update from Stephen.
All right, thank you, everybody. So I can assure you that I didn't put the time down for this, so 45 minutes is much longer on the agenda than what this presentation will be. But what I wanted to do was just take a few minutes and help us just kind of see where we are in our strategic plan. We'll actually do a much bigger presentation of our strategic plan in our board retreat in August, when we've had our first full year with this strategic plan. But I just kind of wanted to give you a little update to show you where we were right now with some of the pieces of what we're doing. And so I'm going to start with a little share here and show you first. Let me make sure that I get the right thing. All right. So right now, what we're doing is we're tracking some of our strategic plan, the goals and the action plans. You don't have to read this. I'm going to jump off of this pretty quick, but I want you to know that in each of our goal areas, we're starting to track what are we doing, when are we doing it, and starting to populate a chart that I'll share with the board members as we start to populate it more. But what I really want to do is move you over to the presentation. And so I hope that everybody can see the strategic plan update now slide. Okay, good. So this is just to give you a little idea of where we are. So our strategic plan, we're in our first year of implementing this plan that we spent a good amount of time over the last year working with the community, the schools, the board to put together. We out of that planning process, we have our core beliefs that drive all of our work around humanity, justice, community belonging, well-being, transparent, responsible leadership, community engagement, relationships, and rigorous curriculum and instruction. So that's the base, the foundation of our strategic plan. And then our strategic plan has 3 goals. And so goal number 1 was to build and nurture a culture of well-being and inclusivity. And under that, we had some action steps. And so those other 4 bullets are the action steps that we have around this goal. I'm not going to read all of this to you, but I'll leave it up so that you can look at it. This was also on our website and shared with the board. And so those are our action steps. And then I want to point out is that where are we? So our current progress and upcoming work, and this is what I'm going to do with each one of the 3 goals, is we begun the implementation of what DESA is the acronym for the screener for social emotional learning. So that helps us see where are kids right now. Are there any issues that they have? Is there anything that we need to address need-wise with our students? And so that screener just gives us a way to start that conversation and look at how the kids are doing. Our leadership team has been training with Rebecca Haslam. She is Seed the Way is her organization. And we've been working with her on our anti-bias, anti-racism work. And really the core of that work is a curriculum equity audit. Now, we have not conducted the audit yet. That's kind of our next steps with that piece. But what we're doing is we're learning, what are we looking at? What are we looking for? How are we evaluating our curriculum so that it makes sure that it doesn't both leave students out, leave experiences out, so that it's a more comprehensive and inclusive curriculum for all of our students. Like I said, we'll report on the audit once we do it, but we've been working with her to develop that work. And U32 has taken up that training as well with Rebecca Haslam for the department facilitators and faculty to work on what are their practices and where are they creating barriers, systemic barriers to students accessing their curriculum, accessing their education. And they're working more on what's the classroom level look like. So the district level work is kind of the big picture. And then at U32, they're looking at what does it look like for in the classrooms. And some of our elementary principals are also looking to, is this work that they want to do for next year as well? Now that we've been through some training with Rebecca Haslam. Our upcoming work, just kind of the quick one, is the Community School Initiative. The work that we're doing around community schools will definitely feed into whether or not we can meet goal number one, because that well-being and inclusivity has to do with the resources that our community can support our kids with as well. And so that's some of the upcoming work there. Our second goal was to challenge, empower, and engage each student through evidence-based instructional strategies and curriculum and varied educational opportunities. And so you can see our 4 bullets there. So that 4th bullet, I'll point out, leverage professional development systems to support educators in their learning. There's actually 3 sub-bullets to that one. I didn't put them all here, but they're part of that is developing our anti-bias and anti-racist practices so we have more inclusive learning environments. It's also developing what's called universal design for learning. So that's really a pedagogical approach, right? So it's how do we teach in the classroom so that all students have access to a rigorous curriculum, and then how do we integrate our transferable skills? It's one of our student learning outcomes, transferable skills, into our classroom practices. And I would say that is work that we and you'll see in the next slide how we're building systems to start addressing those. All right. And so our current progress. Curricular-wise, our elementary writing prompts. So this is our curriculum council has been working on developing writing prompts and our writing rubrics. And our teachers what they do is they give the writing prompts to the kids at all the various grade levels, primarily at the elementary level. And then the teachers come together and they score those. And they look for what are our patterns that we see? What do we need to change in our instructional practices? Are there curricular changes that we need to make? And that work is really being facilitated by our curriculum council. So they come together, they look at the data, then they go back to their respective schools and work with their teachers. And these are teachers in the curriculum council working with other teachers to go back. And so trying to increase our writing, proficiency through that work as well. And then we also have just recently our U32 Student Council, members of the Student Council, and our Supervision and Evaluation team, which is teachers and a couple of administrators, are working on creating feedback forms for teachers from the students. And so that's part of our how do we make sure that student voice is a part of our process of giving feedback in our programs, our instruction, and all of that. So they're just beginning that process. Of how can we create a way for that feedback to occur. We are working on making sure that our humanity and justice committees are at each school. This is our work towards the anti-bias, anti-racist work. And this is, we have a humanity and justice committee for the whole district, but we're really wanting to make sure that each of the schools has their own committee so that they can address these areas of concern, need, planning. There's a whole variety of things that these groups can work on based upon the needs of their school. And so we've been working on making sure those committees get up and running. and then those curriculum equity audits that I mentioned earlier. Upcoming work, still that community school initiative. Any curriculum revision that we need to do as a result of what we're learning in things like our writing prompts or the audits that we're doing. And then our elementary schools are working on embedding professional learning in their weekly schedule. So not just our Wednesday afternoons that we use for professional learning, but how can we embed some professional learning within the school day itself? And so our elementary principals have really been working on developing those schedules. And this gives our teachers a chance to work together within a school, either in grade level groups or in at least small grade, kind of a grade span team of people to look at not just students specifically, but also what are some of the things that they want to learn around universal design for learning, or even things like the writing prompts and our common assessment practices. And so that's the upcoming work there. Goal number 3 is foster and commit to responsive leadership that engages the community and communicates transparently. So these are some bold action steps here. So configuration plan, invest in staff and board development. You can read the rest. I'm not going to read to you. All right, and where are we with this work? So we've got the configuration committee, that configuration study work that's being done. Our budget development was organized around providing multi-layer systems of support. And so I'm still trying to keep my regular coffee and conversation opportunities out there in the schools. I've had, I would say, limited but regular attendance. So I've never had a huge crowd, but I've definitely had people at every one of my coffee and conversations. It's not always the same person. So just some outreach there. We are working on our procedures manual in conjunction with the board policies. I think that's an important part of being transparent about how we operate. And our Education Quality Committee has had its regular reports to the board. And so these are ways for us to show the work that we're doing as a district and how we're meeting some of our goals. I think a big part of our upcoming work is communications planning. We have a communications committee that's now together for the board. And I personally am working on developing better communication strategies using Front Porch Forum, school newsletters, and those kinds of things as well. And so I think that's certainly work that needs to be done so that we can make sure as many people know about the work of our district as possible, not just our families that have kids in the schools, but our community members as well. And so, as we do with many of these pieces, I know that was a real brief kind of overview. Like I said, we'll have much more detail after our first full year, which will be at our August 8th, no, August 6th. Sorry, said the wrong date there. August 6th board retreat. But what are some of the things you noticed? What implications? What else? And so I'm going to stop the share so that we can see each other. And this is that Q&A time that we have. So I think maybe board members first, and then we've opened it up to the public in the past if they had questions as well. Elizabeth. Oh, sorry. I'll let you do that, Ursula.
Elizabeth, go ahead.
Thank you. So my question is about the assessment that was recently done for social emotional learning for our students in elementary school. And I apologize if you've shared this before, Stephen, but I am curious, when a child is screened or evaluated for social emotional learning, and there are areas of growth that that are identified, what are some things that schools have done to mediate that and to support students when issues or things are identified?
Okay, great question. So we've administered it one time, so we're learning some of our practices. But what I've seen in schools is there's two places that teachers have gotten together to discuss. Okay, who did this? Who rose to the top, or who got flagged for maybe follow up? And so we've had those teacher teams look at those and say, okay, what are some of the things that these students are flagged by? And then our school counselors have gotten involved. Our school, if there's a behavior support person as well, depending on what the issue might be, they've reached out to those students and delved a little further. Because a screener really just kind of tells you there may be a problem. It doesn't actually identify the depth of a problem. It doesn't really. There's much more that has to be asked, because sometimes the kid may have just answered the question in a way that it just said, oh, well, you need to check with this kid, and there's really not an issue. So there's a follow up for every kid who there appeared to be an issue, either by a teacher, the school counselor, school nurse in a couple of cases, from what I heard, and then I would say the program itself, when it identifies some areas of that a student might need some support in. Sometimes it's things like an executive functioning skill, right? They just need more help organizing their life. And there's some lessons that are embedded within this program as well, as to here's what you can do with that kid to help them. And so it gives some very nice feedback. I know we're learning from this first round as to what information does it give us and how should we respond. But from what I've seen, our teachers are banding together and saying, okay, what's the data showing us? And it's been a real, I think, an eye opener for some cases, and many times, I think sometimes we do these screeners and we say, yes, that told us exactly what we knew, which is good, right? Sometimes it confirms what we have seen about kids already, and it didn't tell us a whole lot of new information, but that's a good thing. That means that we're spotting those issues earlier. And so I hope that answers most of your question.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Chris?
Oh,
I can let you take that on.
no, it's all yours. Well, I won't do it again.
Until the next time. So Stephen, when do we expect an audit to be done that you talked about?
That curriculum audit will probably stretch into the early part of next year for us to do that. I don't want to. We haven't fully looked at the full tool that we use for that, so we're still looking at that. But our goal is to have it done, at least partially done, by next year, and we can start to talk to you about what we're seeing.
And are you satisfied that the measures that are currently in place and being used are effective?
I'm not sure. So, which?
So, for example, the you talked about the elementary writing prompts, for example.
Oh,
yeah. Are those?
Yeah,
is there a way to audit the or determine whether the measure that you're relying upon to that progress is actually doing what you want it to do?
Yes. So we've only had one. We're doing our second writing prompt right now, or we're just finishing it up. So that'll give us a good indication of is the information that we got from the first time and how we use that information to the second time, how are students improving? And so I would say it's a part of our local common assessment plan. These prompts are. And so, I mean, I know that, I was at one school and they're talking about the mechanics of writing and how do they, what did the kids show in this last writing prompt? Then what does that mean for their instruction going forward? So I would say that it's helping us make decisions about instruction and curriculum, which is what we want assessment to do.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Danielle?
Yeah, just coming back to the question of like what I notice. One thing I notice is that there are a lot of ways we're collecting data on both our baseline and also the distance between our baseline and our aspirational goals into this plan, and I think that's good. One means of collecting data that I see absent is the climate survey, and I think that it's I speak under correction. I don't know a lot about how we're going about the collecting of that, and I forget, frankly, the timeline in which it's being conducted. But I do think that like a thoughtful climate survey would really inform both the first and third goals, both in terms of like well-being and inclusivity, and all the stakeholders in our districts, like sort of appreciation of how we're scoring on that front, and also for goal number 3, responsive leadership, and to what degree people's perception of the leadership as responsive is satisfactory to us in evaluating ourselves.
Daniel, you bring up a really good point. So we are going to conduct the climate survey again this year. We had set it on a 2-year cycle, and we had done it last year, but the board requested that we go ahead and do it this year with new leadership in place. And so that is we're working to get that out as soon as possible. We just really weren't geared for it immediately, but we think we can get that out pretty soon.
Any other board members? Julia, was your hand physically up? Okay.
It was physically up. I don't know if this is the appropriate time to. I just had a quick question. How are the rating prompts being assessed?
We have rubrics that our teachers developed around multiple areas. So it's and I'm not going to try to say that I know the rubrics, because I to be very fair, I don't know them in detail, but I do know that they're around several areas of focus. And I bet I even have, I don't know that I have a principal out there that's working on them yet. No. So I'll say this: I can provide you the rubrics if you want to take a look at them.
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah.
Yep. All right. I'll share those with you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Not seeing any other hands from board members, and it doesn't mean you can't raise your hand later. I'm going to ask if there's anybody from the public who has any questions that they would like to ask. Lila?
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what happened to my raised hand thing on the computer. This question is maybe a little bit broader than this topic, but I've been somewhat concerned about the board retreat and things that are covered there, which is done without, public participation. And Stephen mentioned several times that this would all be discussed more at the retreat. And I guess I'm not quite sure why there and how that process works if there are really substantive discussions that are going on.
I would just say that our retreat is typically, I've only been to one, so I can't speak for the others, but it is a chance for the board to do longer term planning around the goals of the strategic plan. That's what we've done in the past. I think I hear in your request, if I'm not mistaken, is that just making sure that whatever we discuss, whatever data we're sharing at the board retreat, that it's made available to the public in some way, shape, or form, and that some of our discussions, if those substantive discussions, we need to be able to share with the community as well and the public.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying, is that it seems like it goes beyond sort of setting the planning process for what's going to happen at future meetings and gets into the meat of issues like the strategic plan. So I do think that ideally you wouldn't have a retreat that the public could not attend. But if you feel that you do have to, I guess I think you should ask yourself why, and definitely share with the public any substantive discussion.
I will add to that as well. The retreat is a place for the board to do learning. So this summer that we had ours, it was doing our open meeting law. And we have to do trainings every year to reacquaint ourselves with the open meeting laws, and trying to think what else in our work plan. It's getting into what does our work plan look like this year and when. is a bulk of that meeting and a bulk of that retreat. Anybody else? Do we have any other questions? Lila, did you have any other questions? I didn't want to cut you off.
Not
if you
about
had
not
more than
about
one.
that. I might at
Okay.
the end.
Okay. Seeing no other public questions on this, I'm going to move into our reports. And our first one up is our COLT report.
Great, thank you. So in addition to we wanted to actually highlight from our COLT report a couple of big key areas. One of them is federal funding. And so Suzanne provided you with some information about our federal funding in the packet, and I would just turn it over to her to give us some information there, Suzanne.
Yeah, we've had lots of questions about our federal funds, obviously, with some decisions being made at the federal level about funding for school systems. We have funds that we received through the IDEA grant, which is for special services. We have funds that we received for Titles 1, 2, and 4. We have Medicaid funding and Child Nutrition Program funding. And we don't have any specific information that says any of our funding will be cut for next year. However, I was at a meeting last Friday, and the AOE did advise that they're watching very closely information about Medicaid funding and Child Nutrition Program funding, and have concerns that those areas are the sort of next in line to be looked at closely and may have a possible impact. And at that meeting also, business managers, it's an opportunity for us to connect with the state and reminding them that the Medicaid system that we have in the state is a little bit different than other systems. And so it might actually insulate us some from some of those cuts. We're exploring that, and the state is looking further into it. Some of the things that you might have heard were cut were local foods programming at the state through the USDA. But I want to reassure the board that that is not our local foods incentive grant. I know there's been some confusion around that and some thought that that was. But the local food incentive grant that we have is through the state of Vermont and is not a pass-through from the federal government. So we're watching things. We're trying to stay on top of it. We do have a lot of areas that we depend on federal funding. One of the things that was said Friday also was FY27 for titles. If 26 is not impacted, 27 maybe. So that could further impact our budgeting for the next fiscal year that we haven't done yet.
Any questions around? Yep.
Patrick.
So the money is certainly an important piece, but the other piece of this puzzle is the Department of Education has lost a lot of employees. And so while that doesn't directly affect the budget that we would get potentially, what kind of impact do you see, or do you see any impact at all about, the responsiveness of education, or the kind of the ease at which you can get the information you need to spend the money, or other kinds of things from the Department of Education that's just personnel, really?
We have only one grant this year that I communicate directly with the US DOE for, and that is our Project Serve grant through Berlin, which is connected to FEMA funding. We met with her a week and a half ago, and she has been called back into the office. She's no longer working from home, and they're just playing it day by day and business as usual for now. She is the only person we communicate directly with. Cuts will definitely impact the state's ability to answer questions because they communicate a lot with Department of Ed.
Okay, thanks.
Diane.
And this is a question, Stephen, it might be a question for you. At the steering committee, I had raised a question, and had hoped to see it in the Colt report about the change in schedule at U32. And so was a little disappointed that I didn't see a report in there. It's really tricky when to answer questions or help people understand decisions when I'm not even aware of what those decisions were. And I guess I'm just a little, again, I'm not trying to micromanage the decision, but I didn't even know about the decision, and it hasn't been in a Colt report. And again, I was hoping to see it in a Colt report tonight as well, so that I can help direct people to who to talk to or even know how to respond.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Becca could not be here for this meeting. And so that's more of a principal's report than the Colt report. We're going to get out the information to you as board members this week, and and she'll be available at our next board meeting to be able to answer those questions. But she and several other members of our leadership team were down at Infinite Campus training. They had a conference, and so she was not able to get back in time for this. I do understand your concern about that. We'll get you information as a board, and then we'll be able to have her answer any specific questions at the next meeting.
Any other questions? So we can move into the next part of that report.
All right. I was going to let Julia give you a little information on the upcoming extended school year. Julia, you got to unmute.
That's Julia Pritchard. You're muted,
Yep,
not
Julia
Julia Hewitt, who was panicking for a moment.
Nope. Pritchard,
Oh my
sorry.
goodness, the introduction was so good too. Good evening, everyone. As Stephen indicated, I wanted to highlight a little bit about what our department is working on related to extended school year. Some of you know this, but some of you may not. So I'm just going to review that an individualized educational plan, or what's called an IEP, is a written plan that outlines the special education and related services a child with a disability will receive. And some students with IEPs require extended school year services. These services are provided when a student's IEP team determines that those services are necessary. And in Vermont, that decision is based on primarily three factors. One is if there is significant regression for a student during vacations, then students are not regaining quickly, they're generally a great candidate for extended school year, which is some targeted support over the summer. If the student's disability presents a danger of substantial regression, that's another strong indicator that a student may need extended school year, as well as if a student's post-secondary transition goals are not yet met, they may be, then extended school year might be required to continue the students' programming beyond their school year. This year, our extended school year will run from July 7th through the 24th, 4 days a week for 3 weeks. And we run our program 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. This year, our sites will be U32 for our middle and high school students and EMES for our elementary students. We generally serve around 60 students. We're excited to let our community know that our ESY coordinator, our on the ground coordinator for this program, will be Heather Clark Warner again, who is a preschool teacher from EMES. Our program provides food service, be coordinated by our new food service director, and that includes breakfast and lunch. Our students receive transportation from their local elementary school to each site, either U32 or EMES. Our programming includes services such as nursing, SLP, and OT services if needed. And so far, things are going really well. We're excited to let you know that most of our teachers are returning from previous years. They're already committed to work with us again, and we'll soon be collecting the names of the students that need the services. So just wanted to give the board a little bit of an update about that. Does anyone have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Julia.
All right. I need to highlight a couple of other things that are not in the report itself. So I need to make sure that that the community is aware that the Washington Central Unified Union School District and the Turtle Island Children's Center are engaging in a fact-finding process to determine whether Turtle Island can make use of any available space in the district. That fact-finding will be looking at Turtle Island's needs, the availability of space within our district, building code and licensing for Turtle Island programming and what they might need for that, and potential lease opportunities if available. So we're at the very beginning of this process to see what's possible and how the two organizations can work together. And as we learn more about what can be done, we'll work with our communities to answer any questions or concerns. And so I just want to make sure we're going to issue a joint press release with Turtle Island so that everybody knows in the community that we've started this process. And I just want to make sure that that we make that public to everyone. Any questions? All right. All right. The other thing, we did make an error in our agenda, which it could be an action item. We had discussed at the last meeting the potential feasibility study between the Montpelier Roxbury Public Schools and Washington Central. This is where I defer to the board on whether or not we need an action item to begin that process. We do not think that we're going to require the board to allocate funds. We have funds, I think, that are available for this. If we were to need additional funds, we would, from fund balance, we would approach the board about that, but we don't believe that we do. This should not be an overly expensive venture, and I know that's all relative. I have included in the chat for everybody, there's a link to our draft document about the feasibility study. It's up on our website. I apologize. I don't know exactly where, but it'll be a part of our board resources and packet or board information as well. I'm thinking we can at least pursue getting some bids on this project and then bring that to the board for approval is what I believe would be fine. I just want to make sure there weren't any questions about moving forward with this, but we didn't warn it as any kind of action right now. And I think so bringing the board bids, I think, would be the appropriate next step.
Chris, you have a question?
Stephen, bids on what?
Oh, so the feasibility study is asking for an outside person to or organization to bring us back information about our school districts. That gives us some more context about our buildings, our staffing. We just really have somebody else put together that information, so we kind of have a side by side of both of the districts and with some early pieces of where might there be opportunities for us to have conversations of merger or just shared services. What are the student opportunities that might exist from that? And what is the feasibility of including other districts in that? There's several retired superintendents and some others out there who do this kind of work. And so we would solicit from them a bid to do that feasibility study. There's a lot of bullets as to what we would want from them in that document that I just shared in the chat. And then there's some needs and then some nice to haves as part of all of that.
And just if there's the funding that is not needed from the board but is already available, what is the range that you anticipate it would be? And I'm assuming we're sharing equally.
Yes, sharing equally, and we both of our earliest conversations, we don't want to spend more than $5,000 total.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Diane?
So, and maybe this will come up, excuse me, when you're talking about the configuration committee's work, but is there thinking around how these are meshing or how they're informing each other as part of these conversations?
I would say gathering the information is something that our configuration committee can then look at as part of this, of what we might want to do as a district, what we might want to do with another district. And then I would just add the other layers. The state is having these conversations as well about how districts might be organized, which will probably play into the conversations that we're both having in our configuration committee, and that we might have as a result of this this study.
And a follow-up on that is, again, just as a board struggling with how do we stay ahead of it and be the ones that are in the driver's seat as opposed to being told what to do and what's best for our kids. And so, and you know, so just wondering about the bird's eye level view in order to move the moving parts, and whether or not we as a board should consider, is there somebody that's you know, whether it be the person who's facilitating the configuration committee or something, but is there kind of a point person to help navigate this?
Yeah, thank you. I think there's a lot to consider with that. So I think I have to get back to you on that.
So I will ask the board a general feel, given that there isn't an authorization for funds needed for this, that we do not need to take action to be able to move forward to look for, I'm going to call them a request for proposals, but is there agreement, a thumbs? Thank you. Do a thumbs up, I guess. Yeah, or I can take nodding too. Okay, so we will move forward. You saw that, Stephen?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. That is it for me. I believe I covered everything. Yes, from the Colt report. We did. The reason there's no principals report in this one, just to be clear, is there were only a few school days because of our break between the last principals report and when they had to have this one together. So we gave them a break, and they will have a full principals report in the next pack, in our next Colt report, principals report.
Thank you. We, on our agenda, we would have student reports. I don't see any of our students with us. Stephen, did you get anything from them for a report?
I did not. So I apologize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand. So we will move on to an update from the Central Vermont Career Center. Patrick.
Yeah, so the Career Center is in the process of selecting and seating students for the upcoming academic year. And part of that process is the unfortunate reality of seeing which programs don't have enough students to move forward. And so we actually had a really rough board meeting last week where we had to decide to cut the Emergency Services 2 program, so the EMES 2, and the Design and Fabrication Stone Working program, which is really disappointing, given the history of stonework in this region and the kind of unique quality of that program. But the reality was we just didn't have enough people that were interested in taking on that class. And then the Emergency Services 1 class is still very well subscribed, and so that there'll be an EMES 1 class next year. And so that kind of gives a little bit of focus to what the rest of the seats are, and there's one more round of selection to whittle down kind of which kids from which schools get into which programs. So it's a kind of dynamic time right now for the Career Center. With our reorganization after votes in towns, I got myself on the facilities committee, so I'll have a little bit more information for you about what the new building situation would be for the Career Center. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. We've got plans. I don't have anything to show you tonight, but we've got sketches from architects of a building and layouts and stuff, which is pretty exciting. We do have an opening still for the at-large position in the Washington, and basically in our region, covered by all the towns in the school district. I know that there's an interested person who has reached out, and that's awesome. But if you know of any other folks that would be interested in serving on the board at the Career Center, they can reach out to me or to Jody, the superintendent over there.
Thank you, Patrick. Anybody have any questions? Seeing none, our next agenda item is a VSBA report. My notes also say VSA, so I think that's Stephen with the Superintendents Association. For
Yes.
VSBA, I'm just going to quickly remind you to read your Tuesday email that has all of the legislative updates and pay attention to the webinars that are coming up. You can always sign up for them, register for them, even if you can't attend, because then they just directly email you all of the materials after. And then I'm going to hand it to Stephen.
Yeah, so there's a resource that the VSA was given access to. Actually, anybody's given access to from Ed Council. I've included it there in the chat. It's a summary and analysis of the Trump administration executive actions impacting education. We're going to get a little page up on the website that gives access to these kinds of resources for people so they can look at them. But this is just another resource that that you as a board member may want to use. They update it regularly, and it gives you what are the executive actions, and then what's their analysis and some of their notes. So it's just another resource for you. Like I said, we're going to try to get a little web page that gives folks access to this information, because we're starting to get it from a variety of places, and it just helps us stay informed about what's going on in education. And so just wanted to point that out. It's pretty dense. You're probably not going to want to read it right this moment.
Moving along, we're going to jump into our board operations. And our first item is to reflect on our budget process. And so the first question would be, what worked? It's where we all jump in and we talk. Michaelan.
Sorry, I couldn't find my hand on the things. I'm glad you saw me. I really appreciated the kind of way that Stephen and the leadership team approached this year's budget. I thought it was done in a way that was very clear, and also it was very much put individual decisions in the hands of the principals, which again, hopefully that's how it was done in the past as well. But this just made it very obvious that was the case, and it for me made it easier because whereas I might have made a different decision for a given school, I understood that was what the principal really felt was best for their community, and so it honestly made it harder to argue with anything because it seemed like a clear and equitable process.
Thank you. Chris?
Thank you. I would echo what Michaelan said in terms of the process, seemingly putting a lot of faith and decision-making at the elementary schools. I think I would like to have a discussion with the board about tweaking it a little bit so that there are certain functions or certain positions like nursing and counseling, things like that, that should be a bare minimum per school, as opposed to putting a principal in a position of, allocating amongst those different competing interests, so that it's not just a give it's almost like the block funding. This is what you get, and what you do with it is up to you. But making sure that there's at least a safety net for some of the services that we provide to our elementary schools at a minimum. And so having discussion like that maybe in August or something along those lines before that process starts playing out, I think would be helpful. But I do think it was empowering for the elementary schools themselves to have a very direct and specific role in allocating where their budget went. Thanks.
Thank you. Natasha?
Yeah, I feel like this year what I appreciated was it felt like the budget was being presented to us from the standpoint of here's what we need for kids, as opposed to here's how much money you want us to spend, and we're going to hit that number. And I know that for me, then when having to think about what possible cuts there were and listening to how the principals presented, because it started from a platform of these are the programs and services that we need to provide our students with what they need to be able to learn. That set a very different tone for the conversation. And I hope that we continue to use that as our base for what we build our budget from, as opposed to here's our cap and we're going to build a budget down from there. So I just appreciated that it felt like it came from that it actually felt like it was student focused as opposed to money focused.
Thank you. Diane?
Yes, I would appreciate too an opportunity to have this conversation with the leadership team as well, to kind of share together what worked for them as well, or what we could do differently potentially as a board. I also think we named a number of things that we said would be monitored and if things needed to adjust. So figuring out what that looks like, and then especially in this current climate, as you mentioned, Stephen, that reading is not only dense, it's a little painful to read at times. And so one needs their Pepto-Bismol with them when they're reading it. But it also is information that we as a board need to know how to support our schools so that we make sure that we're on quicksand right now to a certain extent. So what our budgets look like moving forward, what our schools and students need moving forward may be changing. And so keeping that dialogue open is different this year than next. And so figuring out what does that process look like moving forward too.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add? Okay. The configuration committee update. I'm going to look to Chris and Julia. You guys had a meeting tonight?
Yeah. Julia sent me a quick little note that said she wanted me to give a little update because I gave most of the presentation, which I would invite any members of the committee to fill in. So I did a presentation on actually tried to couch it in the mission and vision is defined by our strategic plan, and our programming is what we need to meet that vision. And then our structures come from our programming, and then our budget comes from our structure. So we really want to have a conversation around programming. So what is the program that we want for our students? And we talked about what could core programming look like, and how do we define that? And very similar to some of our budget discussion that we just had, and some of the feedback is how do we define that core needs of our students, and then what are the other things that we want? What are the additional supports? What are the additional programming that we want for our students within each of our schools? And then the structure of our schools should meet that programming need. And so, but I think, and therein lies the very difficult conversations that we have to have as to what level of programming do we want, and then what structures best meet that need. I would also, just from my own standpoint, and I'd open it to any of the members of the committee, is that our schools are those what we call the multi-layer system of supports. There's a lot of components to that as to what builds a good system. And many times our schools can do a couple of those things pretty well. And then we have to talk about where do we give on some of those parts of the system to maintain certain configurations. Because we can't necessarily realize all of those things with, I would say, with any structure, always has its drawbacks. So that would be, I think, where our communication went. Members of the committee, anything else that I need to add in there?
I don't think so. I think we had some good public comments on it, on the committee as well, and we'll move onward and upward.
Yep. I will say that I included my presentations in the chat. So if there was somebody who didn't get that, it's also posted with the on the website, but it's in the chat there for anybody from the community.
Natasha, you have a question?
Yeah, I know that at the first meeting there was some conversation, and I believe there's some follow-up too about the idea of the term configuration and thinking about defining what that meant and or possibly even coming up with a different term to help kind of frame the work that the committee was doing. And I'm just wondering if you could provide any feedback on if anything came out of that discussion.
I can, do you want me to?
Go, Keely.
Stephen, maybe if you can pull up the definition we came up with from last week's or 2 meetings ago notes. Natasha, we did discuss the term configuration, and from what I'm remembering, although everyone can chip in, we discussed a couple of alternative terms, and then someone made a point that in this time where I think the transparency is really important between the board and the community, people thought that it might be seen as trying to mask the same process under a different name to kind of obfuscate what we were doing. And so I think we decided as a committee that we should continue with the term and make sure that it's defined clearly underneath it.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm looking it up in the minutes right now.
Go ahead,
Julia.
I think that that decision was reached primarily because of input from the community members on the committee. Keely, am I remembering that correctly?
I think so. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will apologize. In the minutes, it's all the discussion, so I don't.
I can look and I'll post it in the chat.
Thank you.
Let me look.
Thank you.
I apologize.
That's okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for the configuration committee? The parts of them that we have? All right. We have an item to talk about board vacancies. And I guess I will lead this. I don't think we've assigned it to anybody. So we still have our district clerk position is still open. And we have a seat in Berlin. And I can only read half the note I have. So we're just going to have to keep posting for interested parties for both of those positions. Chris, you're still muted.
So we also have a vacancy on the reconfiguration committee for Worcester that we need to post as well. So I just remind. So I'll move to amend the agenda to include that as part of our discussion and what we should. How should we go about posting for that?
I don't know that we need to amend the agenda. It's part of our discussion now on board vacancies
I'm kidding.
and / committee vacancies. Stephen.
I'm just kidding.
Chris, we did have another person from Worcester who had applied originally.
Right.
And so I think a question to the board is, do we want to just go invite that person to join us since they had already expressed interest? And that would move the process along a lot faster.
Was it only 2 people that expressed interest? Okay, okay.
Yes.
I'd be happy with doing that.
Let's do a show of thumbs on that. I've seen a bunch of you. I know Keely's looking stuff up. Okay. And I feel like, Keely, you were probably part of a conversation at your configuration meeting on that vacancy.
I think.
But maybe not. Never mind.
We had very little conversation. We brought that to the full board.
Okay.
Great.
Stephen, will you reach out to that person?
Yes. So we will. I'll reach out to that person and Floor had already communicated with that person as well to see if their interest was still there. Just wanted to make sure that was okay with the board, just to continue with that. I think it's a great idea.
Yes. I think it'll help accelerate the process. If for whatever reason they're unable or no longer interested, I assume it will come back to all of us again.
Well, if something were to happen, we would go ahead and post and start looking for that person.
Right. Okay, we don't need to come back, just post, right?
Right.
Right, okay. Thank you.
We good? So the communication committee will include something, hopefully with our next post out to Front Porch Forum on our vacancies. Our next agenda item is from the finance committee.
Well,
and I'm gonna let Stephen take this away. That's a really long title.
Yeah, I would just say it is not actually from the committee, but it falls under the finance committee's purview. So what is in your board agenda is a motion. So it is an action item. Should you wish to take it at this moment in time, you can, as a board, push this back to the finance committee if there's something you want them to consider. But the Berlin Volunteer Fire Department no longer exists in that name. It is now a municipal fire department. They have a lease with us, a 50-year lease with us that we're in the middle of, and only the board can transfer or give authority to transfer that lease to the town of Berlin, and that's the request that they have made. And so, it would.
Patrick.
I would move that the board approve the Berlin Volunteer Fire Department's request to transfer its tenancy of land on the Berlin Elementary School property to the town of Berlin.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Natasha. Thank you. And let's open it up to discussion. Chris.
So we are only, well, first of all, Stephen, do we know from our attorney whether or not this needs to be something that we do in writing because it deals with land?
Yes. So, my thinking on this, he just gave me the motion.
Okay.
I believe he would have to prepare some documents in writing. And I would ask that the board, you may want to amend that to say that the superintendent and chair can sign if that's okay with the board. Otherwise, the original lease was signed by the board members of Berlin at the time.
Yep.
And so, yeah, somebody's going to have to sign for the district at some point to amend those documents.
Okay. And do you know if we have to be careful in our motion that we're only transferring the obligations and the rights that are in the current agreement and nothing more than that?
Yes, the current agreement is all that we would be transferring the rights to, and our attorney would make sure that that was clear in any documents.
Okay, great, thank you. That's all I have.
And Diane.
Yeah, so I hear what you're saying, Stephen, but we just passed a motion that didn't say that. So I'm wondering if because this it doesn't have those couple of clear caveats that you had just mentioned and that Chris just mentioned about who's got the right to do that.
Patrick, would you care to amend your motion?
Yeah, I can amend the motion to make it clear that it's limited to the language of the previous agreement. Is that sufficient?
And to authorize these,
And,
I
yeah.
guess, do we want to move on this, whether it's the board and the chair, like the superintendent and the chair?
I think so. I think we should include it all in one, otherwise it may come back.
Okay, and then to empower the superintendent and the chair of the board to sign for the district.
Natasha, do you agree with the amendment? Perfect.
Great.
Now, any more discussion? We're clear? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing no abstentions or opposition, motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Now we get to move into our policy committee, so I'm going to let Chris take it away.
Thank you. So we have 3 policies up for consideration, 2 to adopt, 1 to repeal. And so we'll start first with C51, which is policy to ensure safety and resources for family impacted by immigration enforcement. We dealt with this policy at our last board meeting, adopting it at that time, and I am going to move that we re-adopt it now, now that it's been properly warned.
So let's start with a motion, and then we can have discussion.
That's what I just moved.
Oh, did you just move?
Yeah.
Then I need a second.
Oh,
Yeah.
second.
Thank you, Zach. Discussion.
I see a hand up from someone.
That would be me.
Stephen.
I just want to report back from our attorney. No issues with this policy overall. There is one slight risk that he wanted to make us aware of. This Pietro Lynn. The Immigration and Nationality Act of 1954 says that a public official, if asked, has to provide information to law enforcement subject to a 20-year jail sentence if they're up to 20 years in jail if they're convicted. The reason he wants us to just be aware of is that this is a very slight risk that should somebody in a public position, which would be someone like myself or a principal, does not answer the questions of law enforcement or provide them support, we could be taken to court. This law has not been tested in court for that kind of situation, and he does not consider it a significant risk. But he said he would be remiss if he didn't tell us that this existed, but that it should not in any way influence our decision to approve this, just that we needed to be aware.
Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, let's vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? And any abstentions? Hearing no abstentions, no opposition, the motion passes.
So next up, we have C71, and this is for adoption. It's possession and administration of emergency and non-emergency medication. This is a recommended policy. We pretty much adopted the language provided to us by the VSBA. I think we tweaked it a little bit, but not much. And if we adopt this policy, we would then move on to repeal C30, which we currently have on the books, and addresses the same basic issue. So I move that we adopt policy C71, possession and administration of emergency and non-emergency medications.
Second.
Second.
Who? I saw a lot of lights go on. Who was my
I
second?
said second.
Okay,
Keely.
Keely
Keely.
beat me.
Any discussion?
Should we do this at once, or is it? I mean,
Separately. Let's do it separately.
We do it separately.
Yeah.
Chris, can I ask a really pedantic question?
Well, if it's pedantic, I won't be able to answer it. So why don't you ask
any of you on the policy committee, just the numbering we did not take because VSBA has a model policy for emergency medication that has its own number. Is the C71 its own new number? Thank you. See?
Look.
Stephen nodded. See?
I know you did that.
All right. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Hearing no abstentions, no opposition, the motion passes.
Okay. So now I move that we repeal C30, which is the student medication policy currently on the books.
Second.
Second. Yeah.
Was that you again, Keely?
Yeah.
Awesome. Any discussion?
Are all the policies from the 2020 so short?
No.
All right.
Another pedantic question.
Hearing. Nope. I have to vote. We have to vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any objections, say nay. Any abstentions? Hearing no abstentions, no objections, the motion passes.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I did not see any personnel. I do not believe we have any personnel to approve. So
There are none.
we're moving on. And so we're on to our consent agenda. So I need motions to approve our minutes. Don't all of you jump at once.
I move that we approve the minutes for our February 19, 2025 meeting.
Second.
Do we want to do them as a slate, which would also include March 3rd and March 12th?
Yes, and I moved that I amended to move approve our minutes for our March 3rd and our March 12th, 2025 meetings.
Second.
Are you okay with that, Keely?
Yes.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those
Aye.
opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions? Hearing none, it passes. And board orders, does anybody have them in front of them? Yay, Diane.
I
Take
can't
away.
read them as dramatically as Daniel did last time, but I'll read them as best I can. That we move that we accept the board orders in the total of $608,706.56. Do we need to break it down?
We don't. I think we've usually just, in the past, we've used the whole shebang.
Oh, second.
Thank you, Zach. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions? Hearing no abstentions, no objections, the motion passes. I'll send out an email to you guys so that we remember to send our electronic signatures in to Melissa.
Thank you.
And then next we have future agenda items. On the list, we have board evaluation, and everybody did it, right? Good job. Advocating as a board and superintendent evaluation, which I feel like we've done, but does anybody have anything that they want to add to future agenda items? Diane?
I'm wondering if the superintendent evaluation is connected to the climate survey?
Could be. Oh, Steven's got his hand up.
Yeah. So in April, I'll bring you the goals based upon the evaluation is what it is, and that will include the climate survey as part of that.
Thank you. Anybody else or anything we want to add to potential future agenda items? All right, board reflections on the meeting. Now's your time. Hearing
Can we
none.
always keep them this short?
Yeah, nice job.
We can all talk fast. Sometimes I think virtual helps with that though too, right? It keeps us steady. So I'm going to open it up to public comments. Lila, I saw you turn on your camera. Do you have a comment? I won't make you find your manual hand raising button. You did. You're still muted though.
Lila, you're mute. Lila, you're muted.
Yep, I got it. I got
Okay.
it. Sorry. This is really quick. I think I've made this comment before. There are things that are discussed in the meeting, that are presented just in the meeting, referenced in the meeting, that never make it onto sort of the meeting record. And I'm thinking particularly about the feasibility study information that Stephen presented. It's in the chat. I don't think anybody is gonna, I don't even think you can see the chat when you look at the recording. I think you need to have some kind of a process for including those presentations in the board record regularly. And last time there was a discussion about the criteria and the job description for the person who would be working on the community schools project. And that was really hard for me to get to even look at. So I just would ask the board to figure out how to do that better.
Okay, thank you. Stephen, the things that we shared tonight, are those things that we can post with the minutes in our table?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Are there any other public comments? All right, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Patrick. It was seconded by everybody.
So many seconds.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
All those in favor?
See you later.
Yeah, but we need to take a vote on it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Exactly.
Leave. Anybody opposed to ending the
I want to
meeting?
stay here.
Thank you.
Night,
Have a good
everyone.
evening.
Bye.